democracy is on the ballot in 24. Yet the same people preaching this mantra know better. They continue to lie directly to the American people without hesitation and remorse. Rep. Dan Goldman and Jamie Raskin, both lawyers, and Mr. Goldman, a former prosecutor with the SDNY from New York, will continue to lie today in this hearing and then go straight to the media to tell more lies. Hunter Biden's defense attorney, Abby Lowell, weaponizes letters to Congress to try to smear my name and mistake the cold hard facts.
Mr. Chairman.
In an attempt to save his powerfully connected client and his father. I challenge Mr. Lowell to make those claims on national television so he can be held accountable for his lies. Prior to my successful business career, I was an officer in the United States Navy. At Navy's Elite Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, I later served as the command's chief technology officer.
Proceed. I apologize for the disruption from the...
Okay. Am I supposed to say it's my time, Mr. Raskin?
Yeah. But please, Mr. Bobulinski, please come to order. Mr. Bobulinski, please proceed.
Okay.
Please proceed. I apologize for the disruption from the minority.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it saved his time, but he called members of this committee liars, and I just want to know whether the order and decorum requirements of House Rule 11 apply to witnesses appearing before the committee. Does it apply or does it not?
Should I address? I don't...
There's decorum from the members. We've asked for that. There's no language that I'm aware of pertaining to a witness.
Thank you.
So don't make sure we didn't waste any of his time on the opening statement. Mr. Bobulinski, I'm sorry for the disruption. Please continue your opening statement.
I think you, Mr. Raskin, used...
We'll make sure it's right. We'll make sure.
Okay, great. I just want to restate, make sure the American people hear all these facts. Abby Lowell weaponizes letters to Congress to try to smear my name and misstate the cold hard facts in an attempt to save his powerfully connected client and his father. I challenge Mr. Lowell to make those claims on national television so he can be held accountable for his lies. Prior to my successful business career, I was an officer for over 6 years in the United States Navy's Elite Naval Nuclear Power Training Command as a decorated master training specialist. I later served as the commander's chief technology officer, where I held a huge security clearance from the Department of Energy and the NSA. When I left Nuclear Power Training Command, I was the #1 ranked direct input officer in the entire command. And then I jumped into the business world and public markets. While I have made a few contributions over the years to Democrats, such as Representative Ro Khanna, I don't see him, but I hope he shows up today. He sits on the Democratic side of the Oversight Committee. I'm not a political person. I come from a family with a long history of distinguished service in our nation's military, including my father, both of my grandfathers, and my brother, all of whom were willing to sacrifice their lives for this great country. My sister serves our military vets for 2 decades at the Veterans Administration. We've lived our life as a family in service to this great country. I hope the American people will pay close attention to this hearing. I also hope they will understand that some members of this committee will engage in absurd attacks and efforts to try to deflect attention from the facts. And I will present today by questioning my integrity and my patriotic duty. You may see me speak passionately at this hearing, but for good reason. Not only was I willing to die for this country, every single male member of my immediate family was willing to die for this country. I want to be crystal clear. From my direct personal experience and what I've subsequently come to learn, it is clear to me that Joe Biden was the brand being sold by the Biden family. His family's foreign influence peddling operation from China to Ukraine and elsewhere sold out to foreign actors who are seeking to gain influence and access to Joe Biden and the United States government. Joe Biden was more than a participant in and a beneficiary of his family's business. He was an active, aware enabler who met with business associates such as myself to further the business, despite being buffered by a complex scheme to maintain plausible deniability. I ask this big question. If there's no evidence of corruption here today, if Joe's conduct and the conduct of his family were fully legal and proper, then why are they so dishonest about it? Not just slight misrepresentations of fact, but deep untruths about the entire corrupt enterprise. Hunter Biden gave his transcribed interview on February 28th and lied throughout his testimony. Here's just one egregious example of Hunter's perjury. He lied to the committee on important details concerning his money demands and threats to CFC in text messages on July 30th and 31st, 2017. He leveraged his father's presence next to him in that infamous text to strong-arm CFC to paying Hunter immediately. Jim Biden also lied extensively throughout his transcribed interview on February 21st and perjured himself. An example of that, on page 100 of his transcript, Jim is asked specifically, do you recall having a meeting with Hunter Biden, Tony Bobulinski, and Joe Biden? Jim's response, absolutely not. The committee was so shocked by his perjury that they asked him the same question multiple times. Each time he denied meeting with me and Joe Biden. After the committee showed him text messages confirming that I met with Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and Jim Biden at the Beverly Hilton in May 2017, Jim Biden, with a former U.S. attorney lawyer sitting next to him, still denied that meeting took place. Hunter Biden, in his own transcribed interview, confirmed that that meeting took place. Hunter confirmed his uncle perjured himself in front of this committee. I'm simply here to tell the truth to the American people, and I hope each and every one of you, congressmen and women, give me the opportunity to do that instead of focusing on Russia or smearing my family's name or focusing on facts that are irrelevant today. I yield back.
Thank you.
The first 20 minutes of our interview a few hours ago with Tony Bobulinski, well-known international businessman who was asked by the Biden family to do business with them in China. He met with the former Vice President Joe Biden 2 separate times, and they talked about the China business deal. Now, this information has been out for several weeks. It's been in the hands of a number of different news organizations. The reason you're hearing a lot of this for the first time tonight on this show is because they have resolutely ignored it and tried to suppress the story. Joe Biden has rarely been asked about it, though there is an enormous amount of detail and documentation that no one has refuted because it's real. This topic did come up because the president pushed it at last week's presidential debate. And what was notable was that Joe Biden didn't deny any specifics about his connections to the Chinese Communist Party, his family doing business there, he himself participating in that business. Instead, Biden dismissed the entire story out of hand and suggested that Tony Bobulinski, who is a veteran, a former naval officer, was part of a Russian disinformation campaign aimed at this country. His evidence for that? Well, there wasn't any. Instead, he cited a letter from, quote, 50 former national intelligence folks, almost all of them partisans, every one of them a liar. None of them had directly assessed the information. Not one of them called Tony Bobulinski. They knew nothing. Joe Biden said that on stage. And so when we spoke to Tony Bobulinski, we asked him his reaction to that. And here's what he said. Tell me about the conversation that you had with Joe Biden. What did he say to you?
You mean the morning after he spoke?
That's right.
There was 10 people running around, getting him something to drink, and we were backstage in a cramped space, and he asked me to walk with him out to the car, and he just asked, how I did and what I thought of his speech, and I thought he did a great job in the speech, and obviously cancer is a very serious thing that we should all be working together to solve. I just lost a sister-in-law within the last 2 weeks, sadly, to cancer. And then he just sort of asked me to keep an eye on his son and his brother. Yeah.
What do you think he meant by that?
I think he was conscious of things, and I can't speak for him. Maybe
right.
I would love for him to go on record. As I referenced earlier, I'm only sitting here because they have not only have they not gone on record, they've denied it, and they've tarred my family name in a long history of serving this country, and have other congressmen now talking about Russian disinformation.
This whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin.
I held a top secret clearance from the NSA and the DOE. I served this country for 4 years in one of the most elite environments in the world, Naval Nuclear Power Training Command, and to have a congressman out there speaking about Russian disinformation, or Joe Biden at a public debate referencing Russian disinformation, when he knows he sat face to face with me, that I was traveled around the world with his son and his brother, to say that and associate that with my name is absolutely disgusting to me.
Did you complain about that? I mean, to suggest that you were committing treason or a part of a foreign attack on our democracy, which is how they characterized it. I mean, that's such a serious and I think unfair charge. Did you bring this up with them?
Well, in basic form, you're exactly right. They are publicly accusing me of treason right now, treating me like I'm insignificant, or the 50 years of history that my family served this country is insignificant, and that's why I'm sitting here having this. I assure you, this is the absolute last place I want to be right now, and the last thing I want to be doing right now. But I feel like I have a patriotic duty to this country and every American citizen to go on record and to find the facts for them and let them do their own work. Let them decide how they view those facts or not. But for the Biden family to deny these facts, and then not only deny them, they could have just said no comment. But they didn't say no comment. They then brought in Russian disinformation and basically associated my name with that, which is absolutely disgusting to me. And I had to go on the record. Last weekend, I was in Virginia. Sadly, my sister-in-law passed away at around, I think, 6:38 Saturday morning. That's the wife of my brother, who spent 28 years serving this country as a naval flight officer and just retired. So you can imagine me dealing with that and the tragedy of that. When I saw Adam Schiff go on record talking about Russian disinformation after this email had been posted online by the New York Post, and remember, that email was to me from James Gillier, right? It wasn't, I wasn't blind carboned or CC'd on that. It was to me stating that I was going to be the CEO of this enterprise. I was at the end of my rope. And so I called Rob Walker, and I told him that if that statement isn't retracted by Congressman Schiff by midnight on Sunday, that I was going on record and I was disclosing all the facts to the American government, to the American citizen, and the world. I was hoping the Bidens would do the right thing, or Schiff would retract his statement. But I could not allow another minute, another hour, or a day for my family's name to be associated or muddied up around Russian disinformation. So even as I sit here today, I would ask the Biden family to come on record and stop using my name or associating it with Russian disinformation. It's absolutely disgusting.
So this is Rob Walker, the representative of the Biden family. I believe his wife worked for the Biden family, apparently. So you said this to him. I won't go public. I just want them to retract the accusation that I'm an instrument of Russian disinformation. What did he say?
That's correct. Rob is under a tremendous amount of stress.
Right.
Obviously, his wife and a child. And he said, listen, let me make some calls. Let me call George, who's Hunter Biden's lawyer, and see what I can do. But he sort of presented it as if that's going to be impossible for me to get done. And, I'm not naive. I know that's not impossible to do. That's a single phone call from Joe Biden to Adam Schiff saying, basically, go on record and retract your statement. You got over your skis. And when I was up late that night, and when the statement wasn't retracted, come Monday morning, I was ready to go on record. And how that record was, I was willing to go in front of any senator, any congressman, the Department of Justice, the FBI, or sit here with you, Tucker, and basically provide the facts to the American people and let them make their decision. This isn't a political focus of mine. People were accusing my family of treason after I served this country and defended this country. So
the reason you wound up here in this interview, and I just want to affirm for our audience, I don't think you had any desire to do this interview.
Absolutely no desire.
Is because nobody else told your story. So were you surprised, given the trove of documents you have, given the credibility that I think is apparent that you have, that no other news organization took the time to unpack this story?
Surprised is probably an understatement of the year. Shocked, because it would be different if this was my word against Jim Biden, Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden.
Right.
That would be a very slippery slope, not something I would take the personal and family risk on it. But I've provided more documents and facts that validate times, meetings, who participated. That email to me on May 13th was generated by somebody else sent to me. It wasn't me generating. These text messages that I've provided are Hunter Biden in the first person, Jim Biden in the first person, James Gilliar in the first person, Rob Walker in the first person. It's not me generating the text messages. It's them speaking. So you can interview them. The FBI can interview them. Our government can interview them. But I was shocked that not only the media is not only discussing this, they're going to the other extreme. They're dismissing it as Russian disinformation. This country has heard enough about Russia. We went through 3 years of every day, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's just absurd. The Cold War is over.
And they're saying it about your family.
Yes.
The Biden family knew that you're going public with this. And you spoke to Rob Walker about it. Again, the self-described Biden family representative. And Biden family, meaning Joe Biden as well. What was his response when you let him know that you were going public with this?
Trying to coach me, trying to sort of say, hey, we don't want to do that. We don't want, press trucks out in front of our house. I'm going to have to move. I could lose my job. And all that, I'm not trying to cause any harm to anyone in this situation,
right,
let alone Rob Walker and his family, James Gilliar and his family. But basically, Rob's position was, if you go on record with all these facts, you'll bury all of us. If he doesn't come out on record, I am providing the facts.
Tony, you're just going to just bury all of us, man.
What was your response to that?
I was focused on pushing these guys to do the right thing, to demonstrate an ounce of integrity in front of the American people. They all know the facts. I live the facts. And luckily for the American people, all the facts are extremely well documented. I'm irrelevant in this discussion, so I can ride off, but the American people can read these texts, listen to the recording that you just played, read the legal documents that were executed in Delaware, and they can form their own conclusion. They don't need me to form the conclusion for them.
Give us a sense of your contacts with Hunter Biden. A lot of this is complex. There's a lot that we're not, and this is television, so we're not putting, everything that we have on the screen because we can't. But for those who might suspect that you didn't really have a lot of contact with Hunter Biden, give us a sense of some of the places where you had conversations with him and over what time frame.
So obviously, as we already discussed, throughout 2015 and 2016, while Joe was still the sitting vice president of the United States, these guys had been doing extensive work around the world in places like Oman, Luxembourg, Romania, that I was being made aware of, but I obviously hadn't come off the bench and agreed to be part of this.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you there. Oman, Luxembourg, Romania.
Correct.
So they don't speak any of these languages. Neither one of these guys has any record of success in business. Neither one has a background in international business. Why would they be doing business in Oman, Luxembourg, and Romania?
Because they have relationships and they have the Biden name that they're able to set up meetings and get people to jump through hoops in an interest to garner favor with the sitting vice president, Joe Biden.
So it sounds like Gilliar is a legitimate business guy, someone who's fluent in the language of international
James
business.
Gilliar, served his country. He's British.
Yes.
He's traveled around the world for decades. He's a very low-profile individual, but he's sharp and he's as legitimate as they come.
Sounds it. But Hunter Biden and Jim Biden have a well-documented, decades-long record of business disasters. Did you get any sense that either one of these guys was qualified to be conducting this kind of business?
The only qualification they had was the Biden name.
But they seem to have parlayed that into quite a few deals in quite a few countries. And I interrupted you, so continue with where they were doing these deals. Yeah,
so you had asked, the extent of my communication with Hunter Biden. So when I decided to come off the bench and entertain being the CEO of Sino-Hawk Holdings, obviously I was brought up to speed on the work that they had been doing in Oman, Luxembourg, France, Romania, Kazakhstan, and stuff like that, because that was all going to be integrated into Sino-Hawk Holdings. And so you asked to the extent that I spent time with Hunter Biden. I personally was in Bucharest, Romania, with Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, James Gilliar, Rob Walker. I was in Monaco for the annual Grand Prix there. I was supposed to sit with Hunter Biden. I met him. I met on the patio of his hotel, and I sat there and waited for 2 hours. And you can imagine how angry and I was frustrated after sitting there for 2 hours waiting for him without a text, a phone call to let me know I can't make it or I'm tied up. And in a text that I think you guys are aware of and saw, the next day he aggressively comes back at me that he couldn't attend the meeting that he himself set up. I stepped away from family and friends on the yacht that I was on with my friends to go sit with him for a couple hours, and he's effectively screaming into the phone that he could not pick up a phone and text me because he was with the Ukrainians and Mykola, the founder of Burisma, and that he was fighting for the only income he has on the Kazakhstan deal that apparently he negotiated. Now, I had no exposure to the Kazakhstan deal. I'm not aware of any of the particulars of the Kazakhstan deal. I just know for a fact there is a Kazakhstan deal because Hunter Biden in first person told me there was in the text that I think you guys have and you will show to the American people. It's not my job to determine what that deal is. I'll leave that up to the FBI or the Senate and the Congress to figure that out.
I just want to restate this. You are not a grifter. You're not someone who's selling access. You're a legitimate businessman who's done deals in a lot of different countries. So I just want you to assess once more, is there anything about Hunter Biden's personal experience, personal qualifications that would justify him doing a deal in Kazakhstan?
Absolutely nothing. The only thing that he had was the Biden family name and the fact that his father at one point obviously was the sitting vice president and potentially would run as a future president.
It sounds like a remarkably ambitious international business program they had running.
Extensive.
He and his uncle.
Extensive.
This is a small point, but I can't get over it. So you saw a number of reporters say, again, in an effort to bat away your story, your testimony on this, that the chairman referred to in a bunch of these emails was not Joe Biden. It was, in fact, the government of China. When you see people refer to the chairman thinks this, the chairman thinks that, they're talking about China and not Joe Biden. So I want to put up on the screen. Here is a text message you received from Hunter Biden to you. Hey, Tony, I have an idea. In light of the fact that we are in an impasse of sorts and both James's lawyers and my chairman gave an emphatic no, I think we should all meet in Romania on Tuesday next week. So you're hearing reporters say that chairman was, in fact, the Chinese government. Here you have Rob Walker responding to you. Clearly there's some confusion over this, and he's saying, and I'm going to put this on the screen now, when Hunter Biden said his chairman, he was talking about his dad.
Correct. There's two chairmen in the story. There's Chairman Yi, who is the chairman of CFC.
Yes.
In that text from Hunter Biden, he was not talking about the chairman of CFC. And what Hunter's referencing there is he spoke with his father, and his father is giving an emphatic no to the ask that I had, which was putting proper governance in place around Oneida Holdings.
So Joe Biden is vetoing your plan for putting stricter governance in the company. I mean, and it's right here in the emails.
Yeah, Tucker, I want to be very careful in front of the American people. That is not me writing that. That is not me claiming that. That is Hunter Biden writing on his own phone, typing in that I spoke with my chairman, referencing his father. If the world thinks that my chairman is not his father, then Hunter Biden would come forward and go on record and state to the world.
But you have the Biden family representatives, Rob Walker, saying right here, May 19th, no. When he said his chairman, he was talking about his dad.
Exactly.
We just showed you the first 20.
You are listening to the voice of the Sons of Liberty. Where we go one, we go all.
Hunter Biden's friend and business partner, Devin Archer, testified before the House, before the Oversight Committee, and he made some remarkable disclosures or revelations. He pointed out that Hunter Biden has met in person with Joe Biden and a number of Hunter and Joe's business associates, And this has happened on multiple occasions. It's estimated about 15 occasions. And then separately from that, on about 20 occasions, at least 20 occasions that Devin Archer recalls, the actual number could be more, Joe Biden was sort of piped in, or Hunter Biden makes a call to Joe Biden, or Joe Biden makes a call to Hunter Biden. They put Hunter Biden on speakerphone, and he's able to speak to Hunter, but also speak directly to Hunter's and Joe's business associates. Now, all of this shows that Joe Biden's claim that he had nothing to do with his son, he was not involved in any way in his son's business dealings, is just factually false. Joe Biden was prevaricating, he was lying, you call it whatever you want. He was not telling the truth. He's in on this. And to anyone who is moderately intelligent looking at this, it's very obvious what's going on. What's going on is not that Joe Biden is weighing in on the substance of the deal, but rather that Joe Biden is there to prove that the access that Hunter Biden is promising is real. Hunter Biden isn't just some Billy Carter, some wayward brother or son who just says, oh, listen, I can get my dad to do this, I can get my dad to do that, and Joe Biden's not even involved, he's not part of the picture. Joe Biden is calling in to say, hey, listen, guys, you know what? The mafia boss is part of the operation. Hunter is my bag man, Hunter's my front man, he's my collection man, send the money to him, then we'll put it through all the shell accounts. It won't get to me except through a kind of intra-family distribution. So this is obviously what's going on. And yet the press, as well as defenders of Joe Biden, including Representative Dan Goldman of New York. Let's remember Dan Goldman of New York is the same guy who led, or was one of the key House impeachment managers for Trump's first impeachment. So let's refresh your memory. Trump was impeached the first time. He was impeached twice. The second one was January 6th related. The first one, think about it. What was he impeached for? What did Trump do that propelled this massive impeachment process, an impeachment trial in the House, then went over to the Senate? Well, it was basically over Trump making a phone call. Who was the phone call to? Ukraine, to Zelensky. What was it about? Hey, you better look into this not Hunter Biden, Joe Biden corruption business. And the corruption business here had to do with Joe Biden getting a Ukrainian prosecutor fired, a prosecutor who was fired for looking into corruption at Burisma, and all this at a time when Burisma is paying large sums of money to Hunter Biden's company, to Hunter Biden and to Hunter Biden's business partner, none other than one Devin Archer. So this is what Trump was impeached for. And so think of the irony of the situation. Trump is wrongfully and preposterously impeached over making a legitimate phone call over real corrupt business dealings that the Democrats at the time denied. There's nothing here, this is all made up, this is all nonsense. So that was the premise of the impeachment. And ironically, the guy who really deserves to be impeached is Joe Biden. The guy who's really selling U.S. influence abroad is Joe Biden. That's the guy delivering influence in exchange for cash. No one could even claim that was true of Trump. All Trump does is make a phone call looking into it, checking into something that turns out to have merit. Now, another thing that Devin Archer said, which I think sums up the whole situation very clearly, is he says that the reason that Hunter Biden was added to the Burisma board is the brand. That was his term, the brand. Well, what's the brand? Well, Hunter Biden doesn't have a brand. He didn't start Nike or Microsoft. Oh, it's my brand. No, the brand is the Biden brand, the Joe Biden brand. And that's what was for sale. Just like when an athlete gets money for promoting a brand, the brand is giving money in exchange for something of value. And here what was of value is Joe Biden is selling Biden family legitimacy, Biden family influence. See, if Hunter Biden is on the Burisma board, it signifies to all of Ukraine. By the way, Ukraine is getting U.S. aid, and in a very notorious boast, you have Joe Biden on camera. I mean, this is the smoking gun right here. Joe Biden on camera saying, guess what? I called up this guy, I called up the Ukrainians, and I told them, you better fire this prosecutor Which prosecutor? Shokin, who's looking into Burisma corruption. You better fire him, or we're not sending you $1 billion of money. I'm going to block that money. So this is a clear case where Joe Biden is essentially using his influence, showing the power of the brand. It's not just a name. Hey, listen, there's some abstract access that Joe Biden is giving you. Joe Biden is performing a concrete task and then boasting about it on camera. So you've got not only Burisma paying for something, but you've got Joe Biden himself, not Hunter Biden, but Joe Biden delivering what Burisma paid for. So if you're looking to close the circle of corruption, there it is. That's the basis for what should be the forthcoming impeachment of Joe Biden. We are in the most vulnerable times in U.S. history with our markets and economy, and that calls for an expert financial advisor for your investments. Yet, most Americans are with a sort of conventional, ride out the dips in the market, advisors that have kept recycling the same advice since the 1980s. That advice will fail you now. Luckily, my friend Rebecca Walser is different. You've seen her on the podcast. She's a tax attorney, a wealth strategist. She has a global MBA from the London School of Economics. She has seen what is coming and protected her clients back at the end of 2021, and she can do the same for you now. Debbie and I did a call with Rebecca's team just a couple of days ago, going over our investments, and we're moving ahead. So join us. Go to friendofdinesh.com. Book a call with Rebecca Walser's team today. That's friendofdinesh.com to secure your investments and your future. Hunter Biden.
He is one of the most famous people on the planet, not just a world leader, but a military leader, and the face, we're told, of global democracy. I'm investigative journalist Ben Swan. He is unmistakable, as Vladimir Zelensky is always wearing olive green, whether sweatsuits or some kind of military uniform. Mostly it's just green, a uniform he wears all the time, really no matter the event, whether speaking before a joint session of the United States Congress, or he's at a black tie gala, or ringing the bell of the New York Stock Exchange. He is always dressed for battle. He really is. People the world over know exactly who he is the moment they see him. But how many know anything about this man? Just who is Vladimir Zelensky? Well, we're told he is an aggrieved, selfless servant of the Ukrainian people. By the way, remember that term. Bravely defending his democratic nation against the cruel invasion of his bully neighbor. This neighbor, we're told, really is the exact opposite of our fearless war hero. Vladimir Putin, you could call him Darth Vader, to Vladimir Zelensky's Luke Skywalker. And like a young Jedi, our hero has boyish good looks and humble origins. We have been handed a laughably simple narrative here. You know, it's easy to digest. It makes for a cut and dry case of good versus evil. But you know, experience tells us something. It tells us that although simple narratives are useful for things like, I don't know, selling a war, they're not so great at telling the whole story or the true story. In this 12-part series, Zelensky Unmasked, will reveal another side to not just the leader of Ukraine, but to the entire war effort itself. Why has the United States and Western Europe pushed so hard for war in Ukraine? And why won't they call for the war's end? Is Ukraine really a bastion of Jeffersonian democracy, or is it actually run more like a tyrannical regime? And why are U.S. taxpayers, people like you and me, continuing to send billions upon billions upon billions of dollars to a war effort that seems really, when you break it down, more like a money laundering scheme? Here at Truth in Media, we've been looking into this story for over a year, researching, digging, and following the facts where others won't. The questions I just laid out for you, we will answer. So our first question today, who is Vladimir Zelensky?
Total creation of the West.
Well, he was selected to act in this role, and he's doing a fantastic job as an actor. Quite frankly, this is the role of a lifetime, and he's killing it.
Vladimir Zelensky was born in 1978 in Kryvyi Rih, an industrial city in the south of Ukraine. Like most others in the region, Zelensky grew up speaking Russian and wasn't fluent in Ukrainian until he took a crash course on the language while he was running for president. Zelensky studied law in college and graduated in 2000. He was active in one of his college's theater groups called Quarter 95. In 2003, Zelensky started his own production company named after his improv group. In 2012, he and his company joined Ukrainian network 1+1, owned by one of Ukraine's most notorious oligarchs, Igor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky has been accused of a number of crimes, ranging from embezzlement to murder.
Zelensky was picked by this oligarch Kolomoisky. He's also the same man that has funded Azov, which to me makes no sense because this oligarch is Jewish.
3 years after Zelensky joined Kolomoisky's company, he starred in the network's hit TV series called The Servant of the People. I told you to remember that name. It was about a teacher who unwittingly becomes a viral sensation for being caught ranting on camera about corruption in Ukraine.
О, простите, я не сдержал. Василий Петрович Голобородько? Да. Доброе утро, господин президент.
Well, get this. A few years later, Zelensky's production company registered a political party called Servant of the People, just like their hit show. Zelensky became the frontrunner in the 2019 election as soon as he announced his candidacy. That announcement was made during a special broadcast aired on Kolomoisky's network. During this time, war had been raging in the Donbas region of Ukraine since 2014. In that year, a coup ousted the democratically elected government of Viktor Yanukovych, a Russian ally. An ultra-nationalist Ukraine regime took over, and the ethnic Russian region of the Donbas refused to recognize the coup government. An intense civil war broke out. Thousands were killed. It's a civil war that raged from 2014 until 2022. 5 years after the start of that civil war and on the campaign trail, candidate Zelensky made peace his #1 priority.
I just support him because he wanted peace in Ukraine. And that was the main thing why people in Ukraine support him. More than 70% of people wanted peace.
He promised, I will talk to President Putin. I will meet with the Russians. We will end this war. And once he became president, he seems to have done a 180-degree change and has been the obedient servant of Washington.
So Zelensky won office as a pro-peace candidate, but then once elected, his tone changed, almost as if he was two different men. No longer an advocate for peace, the new president of Ukraine began arguing that his country needed to join NATO, even though Russia had long considered that to be a red line. That red line exists because Russia is surrounded by NATO from virtually every angle.
Коли українці будуть всі готові, ми обов'язково винесемо це питання на референдум, і Україна обов'язково буде в НАТО.
Although Zelensky is a native Russian speaker, he jumped on ultra-nationalist campaigns to curtail the use of his mother tongue. Let me tell you how he did this. So right before Zelensky took office in 2019, Ukraine passed a law making Ukrainian the mandatory language for use by government officials. This curbed the use of Russian. Now, I want to show you something else, because what many in the West fail to understand is that this is a major problem, because 22% of Ukrainians speak Russian as their native language. The law also outlawed teaching in Russian and required everyone in the country learn Ukrainian. Under Zelensky's watch, in January of 2021, that 2019 law was expanded, requiring service industry employees to talk to customers in Ukrainian first. According to the law, this is not a suggestion, this is law. They could only switch languages if customers asked to switch. Then the following year, another law was passed, which required domestic media to print in Ukrainian. In June of 2022, Zelensky signed another discriminatory decree, this one restricting the availability of Russian books and Russian music. Laws seeking the eradication of Russian culture and language are indicative of how radical nationalism has entered the mainstream of Ukrainian society.
You know, and really, you know, it's amazing to see, you know, and I think that, you know, 8 years ago, there was a lot less pro-Nazi, anti-Russian sentiment than there is today, and they just really pumped up the propaganda, and a lot of people that didn't used to believe it are now believing it.
After reversing earlier positions on language, Zelensky's image was further tarnished with the release of 2021's Pandora Papers. According to leaked documents, Zelensky and his inner circle held 10 offshore shadow companies which did business with Zelensky's old boss, the oligarch Igor Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky was accused of stealing $5.5 billion from investors in a pyramid scheme he orchestrated through his bank. This led to accusations that Zelensky was getting rich off Kolomoisky's crimes. Through these shell companies, Zelensky and his partners reportedly purchased about $8 million worth of real estate in London. By October of 2021, Zelensky, who was elected with 73% of the vote, again under promises to bring peace to the Donbas region and to end corruption in Ukraine, had failed to deliver on his promises. He had, in fact, done the opposite, and his approval rating hovered at around 27%. But then, just 4 months later, the story surrounding Vladimir Zelensky dramatically changed. Russia crossed Ukraine's border with soldiers and tanks in what the Russian government called a special military operation, and then it happened. Zelensky traded his suit and tie for olive green. Well, kind of olive green everything, right? And overnight became a darling of Western media. The timing was perfect. In fact, maybe too perfect.
So he's put forward as a it's the traditional Marvel Comics hero-villain scenario. He's a hero, he's a good guy, stands for everything good, and he's attacked by the equivalent of Lex Luthor in a Superman movie, which would be the evil Vladimir Putin. And they've been, pretty successful with that in the United States simply because that's the only story that's allowed to get out.
So Zelensky was made into a hero, and Russia was labeled the aggressor, wanting only to rebuild the old Soviet Union. But the truth is that the 2022 invasion was far from unprovoked. Despite what you're going to hear in establishment mainstream media, Russia had spent decades warning of dire consequences if NATO continued to expand, and months urging the United States and NATO to formally declare that Ukraine would not join their military alliance. Only months after Russia's 2022 invasion, there were signs that this conflict would be a short-lived one. Reports came out that Ukraine and Russia were coming to a peace agreement. Foreign Affairs stated that, quote, according to multiple former senior U.S. officials we spoke with, in April of 2022, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators appeared to have tentatively agreed on the outline of a negotiated interim settlement.
In fact, Ukraine was already touting that, okay, we've almost got agreement, we have this and that, it's not quite agreed. And then the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Boris Johnson, came flying into Kiev unannounced, and he had a sit down with Zelensky and told him in no uncertain terms, you're going to get back to war, Yes. Cut out this business of talking peace.
Here's former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett discussing the Ukraine-Russia peace deal, which he says was sabotage.
להמשיך להכות בפוטין ולא להגיע, אבל שאל מול, זאת אומרת, הגישה היותר תקיפה, אני אגיד לך משהו, אני לא יודע להגיד שהם שגו, זה מתווך, אבל הכתובת שלי זה אמריקה בעניין הזה, ואני לא פועל על דעת עצמי. כל פעולה שעשיתי הייתה מתואמת לפרטי פרטים, גם עם ארצות הברית, גם עם גרמניה, גם עם צרפת.
אז הם בעצם חדלו את זה?
בגדול, כן. בגדול הם חדלו את זה.
Had the United States and Great Britain not intervened at that moment, had the peace talks been allowed, this war would have ended with some minor boundary changes. Of course, Crimea would have gone back to Russia where it's always belonged. Portions of the Donbass would have gone to Russia. But for the most part, stability would have been restored.
After it was declared that peace was not an option, the deaths mounted and repression escalated.
I had to flee Ukraine last year, not because of the Russians, but because I was threatened I had death threats to my life. And I had to flee Ukraine because I wanted peace.
Gonzalo Lira was a popular Chilean-American blogger who died as a political prisoner in Ukraine. His alleged crime was that he voiced opinions online that differed from the Ukrainian government. Lira granted us an exclusive interview a year after he was detained for the first time. And here's what he said to us when we asked about the possibility of false flag operations being conducted by Ukraine's military.
They arrested me, they interrogated me, and I was, released, but the fact is that, how can I put this carefully? I don't want to create the conditions or the excuse to lose my liberty at this time. And so I'm going to have to decline. After this conflict is over, I'm happy to tell you exactly incidents that I think were not what they were claimed to be.
Soon after this interview, Lira was arrested and imprisoned. In messages posted to his Twitter account after he was released on bail, Lira claimed that he was beaten and tortured while in custody. He recorded this message on July 31st, 2023, just 3 months after our interview.
So either I will cross the border into Hungary in the next couple of hours, or I will be arrested again, and God knows what will happen to me.
Lira didn't make it to Hungary. He was rearrested for breaching the terms of his bail, and he died while imprisoned just months after he recorded this message. Lira is not alone in facing persecution for voicing criticism toward Kiev. Opposition political parties and politicians have been banned in Ukraine, and Ukraine's parliament has even voted to shut down the Orthodox Church. In December of 2022, Ukraine passed a law forbidding religious organizations from having ties with Russia. In the aftermath of this law's passage, several priests were arrested and 50 people were interrogated. In March of 2023, Ukraine's most historic monastery, the Kiev Petroslavra, was raided and parts of it were shut down. Metropolitan Pavel Lebed is the head of the Orthodox Church in Kiev. He granted us an interview 2 days before he was arrested.
Меня спросили, когда я виделся с Путиным. Я им ответил, тогда, когда и вы. Когда Путин приезжал в Киев, то вы общались, я не общаюсь и не имею никакого отношения.
Nearly a year into Russia's war with Ukraine, and now most analysts are quietly admitting that Ukraine has no chance, despite the massive numbers of weapons, tanks, defense systems, and don't forget the $100 billion poured in by the United States and Western Europe. Russia has control over most of the Donbass region, and Ukraine's much-hyped counteroffensive has been an utter failure. This isn't a surprise. Many analysts who didn't make it onto mainstream media outlets predicted Ukraine's loss as soon as the conflict started. Given this stalemate, territorial control now currently divided on lines that have been previously agreed to by Russia and Ukraine, the question remains, why is this war still going on?
Well, it seems very obvious that they didn't shell out all that cash to Zelensky in like big bags or something like that. Right? Most of it is going to the American military-industrial complex.
К сожалению, что сегодня нету политиков, а есть политиканты, на котором на смертях, на войне зарабатывают деньги. Вы это прекрасно знаете. Не мне вам говорить, что это делается сегодня. Как списываете на продукты питания и на оружие, а все ложится на плечи людей, простых людей. А вот некоторые, которые дорываются до власти, они это все делают, но забывая о том, что они ответят за все.
They will answer to God for everything, he says. So who are they? The they who created the cult of Ukraine's wartime president. We'll investigate and give you details no one else will in our next episode, as we promise to leave Zelensky unmasked.
You've been listening to the voice of the Sons of Liberty. We wish you peace, strength, and discernment. Where we go one, we go all.